Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another jewelry making video at keepsakecrafts.net. Today we're going to do a little bit of metal forming and texturing with some interesting specialty tools to make these copper and bead earrings. So today's earrings start with some copper discs, and I just bought these at my local craft store. If you want to get more into this kind of a project, you might consider buying your own sheet metal and a circle cutter, but it's great to be able to buy a package like this that has a handful of discs in it, and then you can just experiment. So this is a 3/4 inch copper disc, and what we're going to shape it on is this tool. This is a dapping block, and you can see each face has different sizes of curved depressions, and that's what we'll use to shape. The dapping in metalwork is simply shaping metal with curved tools to give it a curve. Now this set, although it looks quite extensive, and let me just show you from the side, you could see it's all these punches, and so there's a punch to fit into each different size depression. And there's a lot of different things you can use this with. If you don't want to get into dapping quite so much, at the same craft store where I bought these metal discs, you can also buy a set that just has two depressions and two tools, and you can use this just to see if this is something you'd like to do. This set isn't outrageously expensive. It's about $40. Now before we start, there are a couple of things that you need to understand about working with metal, and that is the concept of work hardening. The more you hammer a piece of metal, the harder it gets. The good news is if the metal gets too hard to work before you're done, you can heat it in a torch. That's called annealing. You heat it to a certain temperature, let it cool, and then it's soft again. And then you can continue to work it until it gets too hard. And you can anneal it again, and you can do that as many times as you need to get the shape you want. But since I realize not all of you probably have a torch and want to go to that bother, I will show you a way of doing it today that you don't need to anneal. Now these two pieces have a somewhat different look, but I did the exact same processes on them. I just did them in a different order. This one, first I hammered with the round end of my chasing hammer to give it a hammered texture, and then I put it in the dapping block to give it the dome shape. And you could see the edges are a bit rippled and uneven, and the dome doesn't have a nice curve. This is a more rustic looking shape. On this one, I did the exact same things, except that I shaped it in the dapping blocks first and then hammered on the texture. And the reason this worked out well and that it kept its nice round smooth shape is that by the time I was done doming it, dapping it, it had work hardened enough that when I added the texture, it was so hard that my texturing didn't deform it. So let me show you how that's done. I have my dapping block here, and I'm just going to find a depression that fits into. I mean, that's a little small. And what you do is you work through progressively smaller spaces and progressively smaller tools to get a steeper curve. Although I don't want to curve these too much. I'm going to put my metal blank in there and try to have it in the center. Put my tool in there and try to keep that in the center. And then I have a weighted brass mallet. And I'm just going to try to keep that in the center. And just a few taps, and I have a nice dome shape. And I want a little bit more of a dome, so I'm going to move this to the next one. You can see now it fits better in that one. And get the next smaller tool. And now I'd say that's a pretty similar shape to this one. This will flatten out a little bit more when I add the texture. And now I have my tool here. And now I'm just going to take the rounded part of a chasing hammer and go over the whole thing, adding my texture. And like I said, because this piece has been hardened by the dapping, it's keeping its shape nicely. So you just take your time until the whole piece is textured as you like. Once you have your piece textured, it's time to decide where you're going to put your beads and make your holes. So I'm just going to use this to help me design. I've got these little check glass beads from artbeads.com. It was actually part of a little free gift they sent when they sent my most recent order. And I love these little lentil shaped beads that have a hole drilled rather than through the center off on one edge. Now this was my first thought, was to have 3 dangles coming from the disc, but these beads are maybe a little bit too wide for this disc. And I thought of maybe adding some copper beads to make them a little longer. And I still think those green ones really are a little too wide to use 3 across. So let's try it over here with just the smaller ones. Oh, and I think that's a much more elegant look than this. This is just a little too fat and chunky. So that's what I'm going to do. So what I have here is a Sharpie, and I'm going to mark a little lower, like maybe 1/8 of an inch from at the edge. That's where my center hole will go. And then we want these to dangle freely and not bump into something, so that one and that one, and then of course I'll need a hole to hang it. And then to make my holes, I have one of these. This is a punch drill. And if you aren't familiar with how to use it, I've done a Friday Findings explaining how to use it. You put it in here until you can see your marking, and then you just, a screw punch, that's what it is. and then you can just tighten this down and give it an extra crank, and it will punch through to make your holes. Just like that. That was easy enough. And there's my top hole for hanging. I'll make my other 3. And once I've finished hammering this piece, I'm just going to lay this one over and use the existing holes to mark the same holes on that one. Okay, so here is my copper piece with all the hammering done and my 4 holes punched. And now it's just time to wire on the beads. I have here a 10-inch piece of 24 gauge copper wire, and this will be enough to do all 3 wraps. Doing it all with a piece of wire this long helps give you more control and leverage by having a longer piece, but minimizes waste. So about 1.5 inches from one end, I'm going to put my round nose pliers and make a loop. Just going to bend that longer wire up so that the loop is centered under it, and bend the shorter one at a 90-degree angle. And then go ahead and put on my little glass off-center drilled lentil bead. Open up the loop and pop that on. And then go ahead and close up that loop and hold it with a pair of chain nose pliers. And use another pair to make 2 or 3 wraps with the shorter wire. And although this is more wire than I need, I love having an extra long piece. It just helps me make my wraps really nice and neat and easy. Trim that wire. And then again, hold the loop with a pair of chain nose pliers and use another pair to tuck in that wire end. Now for our longer one, I'm going to add my oval check glass bead and a copper bead. Grab that right above that copper bead, the tips of chain nose pliers, 90-degree bend, round nose pliers, make a loop. And if you'd like more detail on making wrap loops, I've done a whole Friday Findings video on making those. And then we're going to slide this into the center of the 3 bottom holes on our copper piece. And if you like these videos and you've learned something, you might consider becoming a patron. You can support this channel with $1 a month or whatever you can afford. I'd love it if you checked out my Patreon page for details. So once you get your copper piece on there, go ahead and hold that with chain nose pliers, and again make 2 or 3 wraps to fill in that space. And this is the advantage of having this nice long wire. You just have a lot of leverage. And again, trim off the wire and then tuck in the end. And then you'll repeat, and here's an earring I've already completed. You'll repeat to add the shorter dangles to each side, and go ahead and add an ear wire on the top. A perfect finish to these would be your own handmade ear wires. I've shown you in a Friday Findings video how to do that. I just didn't have time. I wanted to get these done, but I may go back later and make some custom copper ear wires for these. Now, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share and subscribe if you want to see more. I upload new tutorials every Tuesday and Friday. A few final touches on here is to make sure that these loops are both facing in the right direction, so that they hang nicely and you can see your beads. So in this case, both my loops are facing in the same direction. You can also add a patina to these if you like. That would be beautiful. Some liver of sulfur. And if you're interested in the tools and materials I use, there's a link in the upper right and the description box to go to my blog post. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my Patreon page to help support these videos. So here's another look at the project we made today. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Happy creating. Bye-bye.